Leinster finally deliver in a final as they claim the URC title. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. So obviously, as a Leinster fan, I'm very happy with the result. But before we get into the game or anything like that, I just want to acknowledge the Bulls players and the Bulls fans, that, I know how this feels in terms of, it's not just losing a final. It's the fact that, you look at the Bulls' performance today and they feel like they haven't turned up for this final. And that's the real disappointment. And, whether it's a player, coach, someone related to the whole setup or a fan, it really is kind of a hard thing to kind of, to take on the day, especially. So, my sympathy is with the Bulls fans because, been fantastic fans. Really enjoyed the build up all week, chatting with you guys as well in the comments and stuff like that as well. And just know, I feel your pain. I will say, like, there obviously will be some asshole Leinster fans that are going to rub salt into the wound as well. And I'm not going to apologize for them because that's on them, not on me. But I will say, just remember, we're not all like that. There are asshole fans in every fan base, unfortunately. But luckily, we're very lucky in rugby that they are, a small minority, even though a vocal minority as well. But, I think most Leinster fans, can say, to the Bulls fans that, we've been through the same thing. We know how it feels. And, the other thing I'd say on top of that as well is this Bulls side is so good. I said it before the game and I meant it that I feel like, between these two teams, obviously one of them was going to win today, but I felt that the other team would go on and claim the title within the next 2 or 3 seasons. And I still believe that. I think that, the Bulls are going to win silverware in those 2 or 3 seasons because they're just too consistent and, they're too good as well not to lift the trophy. People said that about Leinster and it didn't happen for them final after final, but they've done it. But I think it's going to be the same for the Bulls as well. They will get over the line. It may take, a player here and there just to come through or wherever, or to go back to South Africa and just boost them up a little bit. But they've got all the setup there, to be successful, and I think they will be. Okay, so let's get into the game. Then we'll talk about stats and then we'll come back to each of the teams as well. So, first of all, before the game kicks off, we have a late change for Leinster. Luke McGrath replacing James Gibson-Park, who was injured, which meant that Fintan Gunn comes onto the bench. It was great to see Fintan Gunn getting onto the field as well today because, he's a young 9 that I really rate. And anytime I've seen him this year, he's always, brought some pace and just an ability to snipe as well. To the Leinster game. Hasn't been perfect, but he's a young guy and he's learning, and he's not at the level where, like a Prendergast, where he's established in the team, where you're going to be picking at, his bad performances. You're going to focus more on the positives for him. So that was good. But I have to say as well, for Prendergast, I've been critical of him recently and he really turned up today. So well done to him for kind of, carrying all that, pressure that must have been on him and producing a really good performance as well. But still, I think, with players like him, if he's like, Ireland starting 10 or in the mix to be Ireland starting 10, we still have to kind of, not go overboard with things as well. We have to pick out the good and the bad when we're kind of looking at players like that. Okay, so into the game then. Leinster, they win a penalty at the first scrum. Clarkson getting all the plaudits. And for most of the game, it was kind of on their own feet. Like each team were getting the nudge and then winning penalties. Leinster maybe, I think overall, edged the scrums in the game, which was surprising given, the Bulls' performance against that Springbok front row for the Sharks, and the fact as well that, the Bulls were obviously happy given the weather here today in Dublin. Now, maybe part of it was that like the rain actually, the buckets of rain came down early this morning. I was here, I don't know what time it was, sitting at like 7 or 8 this morning in front of my computer, just looking out the window, and it's just teeming down and thinking, oh yeah, that could be a good thing for the Bulls. But it wasn't just the set piece though, that was the problem for the Bulls through the game. So, as I said, Leinster, they get that penalty. They then work the ball to within about 10 metres of the line. Bulls then not rolling away, so Leinster goes to the corner. Bulls then stop them all dead. Sheehan goes off the back. The defence were ready for him, like they were set. They knew, they were wide to it, so they stop him. But then a really good clean out from Tommy O'Brien. Quick ball that allows Conan to pick and go over to score. Prendergast then lands the conversion, 7 points to 0, and great start from them, and well done from Prendergast as well. Wasn't a good kick. He didn't get all of his kicks today, but that was a pressure kick at the start of the game. And I felt like, if he had been kicking or missing his earlier kicks and just making it, that gap a little bit more manageable maybe for the Bulls. Again, there's a few key turning points in this game. Even though Leinster get a great start, where I still felt the Bulls had a chance if they could have just got a bit of momentum in it. So from here then, Baird then picks off a Bulls lineout, and again, just feeling like in the lineup, both teams with lots of options to disrupt. We talked about in the build-up with so many, jumpers, on either side, and both teams, in fairness to them, getting up there and competing for the most part, at least on the opposition throw. Sometimes, obviously, if it's 5 metres out, you want to keep your guys on the ground just to try and counter that drive in the maul. From here, then, bit of a scuffle between McCarthy and Vorster. There's a TMO review for a hand in the face by Vorster. It looks like it's maybe coming around the nose kind of area, not really clear if it's going near the eyes, but I'll say this, right? Fair play to Piardi, because he straight away said to Timo, I want to see it in real speed. He wasn't interested in, some of these, oh yeah, like if you freeze it at this exact frame here, maybe his finger is in his eye or some kind of bullshit like that. Like I'm not into that kind of like, hanging people by freeze frames, no matter what team they play for. And it was great to see him just say, listen, I want to see it in real speed. Then he said, no, it's just a penalty. And I thought that was, good refereeing from him and a fair call as well. But I'll also say as well, first of all, no way that was a card, but also, Clarkson, I thought, was a little lucky that, that's what they were looking at, because I initially thought when they came back with a team review, they were going to look at, Clarkson shoved, Vorster off the ball just after that, so I thought they were coming back for that instead. And it could have been one of those situations where, you get that kind of thing. There's a bit of a scuffle. Clarkson then shoves him. Everybody piles in, which didn't happen. But let's say everybody had a pile in, then you review the things, and then you say, well, it's, Vorster maybe started it, but Clarkson escalated it. And now it's the penalty is reversed. So I thought he was very lucky in that instance there. Then Leinster, they almost worked the space, wide right, but aggressive defense from the Bulls forces them, to pass forward. I thought like the Bulls, they were just that little bit off today, which was, it wasn't that, I didn't think that they played like terribly or anything like that. It was just those little bits were just off for them, because there were good periods from them, especially in defence as well, but just couldn't really get, moving going forward. Leinster then, they strike again. Ryan with a good carry. Then McGrath dinks a ball into no man's land. Barrett gets his first, kind of hacks the ball on and over the cover. Then it's a race to the ball, but it's basically a race between him and Tommy O'Brien. Tommy O'Brien could win it, but you're not going to, like, Barrett created a try, and you're not going to be an asshole and kind of get there first and dot it down. So, he kind of backs off a little bit, and Barrett gets there and grounds to score. That's converted for 14 points to 0. Bulls then starting to make some ground, but Leinster, they're shooting out of the line, and there's a knock on. Leinster then win a penalty at the scrum, but, Prendergast had kicked a 50-22, so we play from that instead. Then the Bulls, I thought, did well to disrupt the Leinster maul. Then they tried to run the ball from their own 22 after Leinster tried a kick over the top, and I'm kind of lucky that James Lowe knocked on as he tried to claim a cross kick from LaRue. And I thought Willie LaRue, I said before the game, like, he generally doesn't play 2 poor games in a row, or again, like, judging by his standards, poor, right? But, certainly below par, let's say. And so it was strange to see him, like that in this game as well, because again, in the semi-final, I didn't think he was at his best. But then, Bulls win a penalty at a scrum. And, it's been a fascinating contest in that scrum so far, because neither team has absolute dominance, but both teams are showing, when they get the nudge on, they're going to win the penalty. And I felt really, honestly, at that stage, Bulls, they don't need to panic. There are routes back into this game for them, and we saw again some periods where they definitely could have worked their way back into the game. But then Leinster then break up the right again. We got Conan, O'Brien, and then Sheehan takes him within 5 meters. The Bulls infringe then to break down. Leinster goes to the corner. Bulls, they really need a defence here. And it felt like if the Bulls had to defend, even though they're 14-0 down, if they could defend this and keep Leinster out and then get the next score in the game, suddenly, Leinster's brilliant start is only maybe a 7 or 9 point lead, which, in a final, you get another score and suddenly you're right back in it. But McCarthy claims the line out. Bulls, they look to have kind of halted the maul, but they kind of went around the side of the maul. So then Van der Fleer comes through the middle and over the score. Converse is missed, and it's 19-0. And I'm just thinking, like, where has this Leinster side been for the last 6 weeks? Because they haven't performed to this level, in that time at all. So it was kind of, it was good, obviously, that they're performing this well, but you wonder, like, why couldn't they keep it going? And again, I come back to the thing of, players being rested too much towards the end of the season, and maybe now they've seen what happens when you pick, your strongest side week after week in the crucial parts of the season in the URC, that maybe that's going to, change minds for next year as well. But you'll have to see. Then Bulls with a chance to get into a decent position from a line out, but it's not straight, and Leinster contested as well. And again, that's just one of those little things where if they had got that right, they obviously would have had some kind of attack up the sleeve, and maybe that gets them an earlier score in the game and changes things a little bit. From here then, I'm just feeling like teams, again, just looking at the history of Leinster in finals over the last kind of 3 or 4 years, and teams have recovered from similar positions against Leinster in finals, and, Bulls, for them, they need to get on the board, and then they need to limit further scores from Leinster. And, if they can get back within a score by about 20 minutes to go, then they've still got a great chance in this game. And Bulls do start to come forward. Papier, see him, he's upping the pace. They're keeping it tight. The big men are carrying well, and they work to within a couple of meters. Sheehan is pinged for offside. Then Leinster then knock on in the tackle as the Bulls go again, and a great chance from a 5 meter scrum. But when they move it off, with the Bulls move it off the scrum, Leinster defence actually starts driving them back. They then go to the backs, but Leroux's kick isn't the best, and Prendergast is able to mark it. He was, a good bit off. He was looking for Kane and Moody out there, and he needed to put a little more distance on it, and a different angle on it as well. It's just too easy for Prendergast to mark it unchallenged. And, I felt like that period there was a massive win for Leinster, and, a score there would have given Bulls something to build on, and, it really would have started the doubts creeping into Leinster's heads again, I think, because, you could see in that second half, Leinster, they weren't, they eventually did, but they weren't, like, in periods where we've seen previously, putting matches to bed, they weren't doing it. Then we get Van Staden gets over the ball. He wins a penalty for the Bulls. They kick that to the corner. Another great chance for them. Leinster claps them all. Another penalty to the Bulls. Back to the corner. And then the Bulls, they I was thinking, are they gonna maybe let's just try go off the top and catch Leinster on the hop. But no, they go back to the maul. Leinster disrupt well this time, and then Bulls back to pick and goes. You can see the Bulls are actually looking tired, as the clock is in the red. They then go wide to Moody on the right. Leinster force him back in field, and then there's a forward pass, and that's half time, 19-0. And at that stage, we're thinking, okay, if Leinster, they score a lot of tries in that kind of 15-minute period after half time, and if they can do that, this game could be won at that stage. So again, I think another crucial period in the game where the Bulls have to score themselves in that period and try and stop Leinster from doing so. And we get into that second half. Then Leinster, they win a scrum penalty early, 3 or 4 minutes into the half. Prendergast slots that for 22-0. And, the game again, they're just pulling away, eking away from the Bulls at that stage. And then Bulls, they win a scrum penalty as Porter was hinging. They kick to about, under 10 metres out. Not quite on the 5-metre line, but pretty close. They had a great chance. Get another penalty for Leinster collapsing. They go back to the corner. Then they go to the maul, and this time, I thought they did really well. They kind of split off, and then Van der Merwe gets over the score, and that was, a really well worked maul from them as well to get the score. And, feeling that, maybe at this stage, 22-7, is this the beginning of the comeback for them? And, I'm, as a Leinster fan, I'm thinking we definitely need another score, and I get worried because we're getting up to that 60-minute point where, the kind of first team of Leinster don't score that many points after 60 minutes. So definitely, even though you should be thinking, oh well, we've got a nice gap, you're still, because again, I'm thinking of what the Bulls are capable of rather than what they're producing at that time, right? From here, then we have a poor kick from Prendergast, but unfortunately for the Bulls, it's spilled by the clerk, and Leinster then have a good position. But Bulls, they win a penalty at the scrum, and you're thinking, oh, maybe things are starting to go their way now. But then Leinster win a scrum penalty of their own in the Bulls 22. They kick that to the corner, and now you're thinking, oh, maybe Leinster are going to clinch the game here. They go to 1-out carries. Bulls, they're holding them out. They work it up to the line. The Bulls are offside. They decide to tap the penalty, but there's a knock on from Porter. Bulls able to kick the ball clear. Then Leinster come back, and Bulls not rolling. And, Sneeman's carry and offload really got them on the front foot there. I was talking about his offloads, not always, the best offloads, but he does so many that there always are some good ones. And that really was a good carry and a good offload and a good time for Leinster as well, just to get that momentum back. And, I honestly, with the penalty though, I was surprised it was given, because you could see Kelleher is there, and for me, he's preventing the Bulls guy from rolling away. And normally the referee, we saw him other parts of the game saying, no, you're trapping him in there. I'm not going to reward you for that. So I was surprised, honestly, that he gave that penalty. Prendergast misses the kick at goal, which to me was, karma, or whatever you want to call it. I don't really believe in karma, but it was whatever you want to believe there, right? That it was the right thing, the right outcome, for me. From here then, de Klerk, mistimes a jump for a high ball and takes out the man, and lands awkwardly as well, kind of, some kind of damage to his knee. It looked like he's got to go off. Thankfully he was hobbling off rather than needing to go off on the trolley cart thing. And I really do hope it's not too serious for him, and he's back to full fitness as soon as possible. Then we have a no arms tackle from Van Staden. Prendergast then, from pretty much the same position where he missed a few minutes earlier, he slots that kick for 25-7. Then Ross Byrne replaces him, and he's coming on for his last appearance for Leinster before he moves to Gloucester. And Byrne, the last few seasons, really his whole Leinster career completely changed, right? Because he went from being number 2 for Ireland behind Sexton, looking like, is he finally going to be the heir apparent, to then he gets overtaken by Frawley, Leinster and Ireland, and then Prendergast comes through as well, and suddenly he's down the pecking order, and he's looking somewhere else then to move on for more, possibly for more game time, especially in big games as well. So can't really blame him for that, and wish him all the best in Gloucester. Then we have a knock on from LaRue, and it was from a Moody pass, a long kick down from Leinster, and pass in field to LaRue. In fairness, the pass was down around his ankles, and he kind of kicks the ball away in frustration, and he gives a kind of a wry look towards Moody as well, just to say that wasn't the best pass he gave me there. Leinster then, with a scrum on the edge of the 22. Fintan Gunn then, he goes on the wrap as they move it off the scrum, and he gets over the score. I thought, he did well to kind of jink his way through and get the ball down. That's converted by Byrne for 32 points to 7. And, right, it's only then, this is how maybe like traumatizes is, sport maybe, not really the thing, but whatever you want to call it, the sports equivalent of that, like how, affected, as a Leinster fan have been by Leinster's, failure in so many finals recently, that it was only at that point I thought, okay, we should have the title now. And that was the final score in the game. So 32 points to 7. Leinster, the URC champions. And as I said, the Bulls, they didn't perform to the level that they wanted to. And I said before the game, I wanted to see both teams performing well. So, although I'm happy for as a Leinster fan, obviously to have a title, I'm disappointed for the Bulls fans and for the Bulls players and everyone connected to them as well, because you don't want to see teams, well, I don't anyway, I'm sure there are people who do like it, but I don't want to see teams turning up not turning up in finals. But as I said, this Bulls team, they're too good not to come back in the future and to get their hands on some kind of trophy, I think, over the next few seasons. So we're going to have a look at the stats, and then we will come back and chat about the teams as well after that. So let me pull them up here on the official site. Okay, so on attack, 4 tries to 1 for Leinster. They had those 3 first half tries, getting that 19-0 lead. But again, we saw in other finals for Leinster that hasn't been enough, because teams have been able to chip away at it, and then they get back to within, 5 points or so by 20 minutes to go. Then the other team go ahead, and Leinster cannot respond. They can't turn it back on. The Bulls, there were chances for them today, but it felt like they weren't at the level to be able to, first of all, to create enough of those chances, but also, to take enough of those chances as well. On to then possession, 49% for Leinster, 51% for the Bulls. Slightly more of the ball for the Bulls, but not in enough threatening positions on the field, really. And then I think this is a very clear indicator between these teams as well. Leinster with 9 clean breaks to 1 for the Bulls, and defenders beaten 13 by Leinster. So they're converting about 75% of the defenders beaten into a clean break, whereas the Bulls 20 defenders beaten for just 1 clean break. So that's like a 5% conversion rate. That is dire. That's terrible. That's when you know that a team isn't firing. To be able to defeat to beat that many defenders, but not actually, apart from one time, turn it into a clean break. On to then offload. So 7 for Leinster and 9 for the Bulls. And again, in terms of offloads, I think the one that really comes to mind is that Sneema one, where Leinster were looking for that extra score, just not necessarily to keep the Bulls away or whatever, but just to, again, you've got to keep that scoreboard moving, because you don't know what's going to happen in the game. Suddenly, maybe a breakaway try or whatever, the other team get a score, and you're kind of, suddenly they get, a boost from that, and you're under siege down to your end. So I felt like that kind of just giving Leinster that little bit more momentum, and not allowing the Bulls to kind of get away or get out from their own line before Leinster got a score was an important one. Then onto the defence, then territory was 50-50, but the Bulls again, they, after Leinster's taking that lead, the Bulls needed to be in the Leinster territory more than they were, and they just weren't able to do that. Kicking game, I thought, was poor from them today. Leinster's was a bit better, but not perfect. Like, there were chances to kind of catch out that Leinster kicking game as well. There was a few wayward kicks, especially again from Prendergast. A few very good kicks from him as well. Again, we got to take the good with the bad. But I felt like the Bulls kicking wasn't that great. And it was kind of the strategy, in terms of the way they were kicking. There were some good kicks where they were turning the likes of Prendergast, and we know he's not the fastest, so we can actually turn him if you do have a decent chase, which normally the Bulls do, but it felt like they didn't put enough pressure with their chases as well. Maybe the kicks were a little bit too long, or I'm not too sure, but it didn't work out for them. Number of tackles then, 134 for Leinster, 106 for the Bulls. So, Leinster doing well in defence. Missed tackles 20-12. So both teams 79% success. And I said before the final as well in the build-up, if either team can get into the high 70s or the low 80s, the defence has gone well. And I felt like for the most part, both defences went well. Like there wasn't massive issues with the Bulls' defense, in terms of like missing first up tackles or wherever. It was just Leinster, when they got those chances, again, once they beat the player, they are more likely to turn it into a break and turn it into a score as well. On to then turnovers 1. So none won by Leinster and 2 for the Bulls. And, I know Van Staden was definitely one of them. He got over the ball to win a penalty for the Bulls, but unfortunately for them, there wasn't enough of that. I think before that Leinster third try, if they had have gotten one there, that would have been a massive time in the game. And if they had got a few more of those, maybe they could have done it. And I felt like as well with the Bulls, I thought before the game they would have committed more players to the breakdown early on, because the breakdown, it wasn't all that clean, and there were opportunities you could see where they'd maybe kind of half clear Leinster off the ball, but then Leinster were able to get back in position. And I felt like if they had an extra guy in there, or just maybe, sometimes it's just belief, right? Sometimes you just have that belief that you're going to win the ball, and then you push that % or 2 more, and it's enough just about to get the ball back on your side. I felt like they had attacked Leinster's break down a little bit earlier in the game, a little bit more aggressively, maybe things would have been slightly different for them as well. Onto kicking then, kicks retained 7 for Leinster, 5 for the Bulls. I thought, again, both teams very competitive in the air. There were a lot of kind of, kicks where it was, rather than just being claimed cleanly, it was kind of being batted back to, to their own side or wherever. But again, I thought, the wings of full backs from both teams, for the most part, did fairly well. Obviously, per de Klerk kind of mistiming that one that actually ended up in him getting injured. Onto penalties then. 8 penalties conceded by Leinster and 11 for the Bulls. And a lot of the penalties, were, kind of the usual stuff you see, like, both teams again giving away penalties on the other team's feet in the scrum, and then, offside and stuff like that. But there weren't, neither team really got to that point where they got a warning from the referee because there was too many penalties in the wrong area of the field or wherever. I thought, there were periods where I felt like the Bulls were putting pressure on, before kind of the break, where they forced a couple of penalties, but then, Leinster didn't give away another penalty at that stage, and it pushed them back. If the Bulls had stayed on the line and Leinster had given away another penalty, maybe there would have been a warning at that stage, but that was kind of the closest I thought we got to it. On to players then. So, in terms of points, so Prendergast with 10 points for Leinster, in the game. So, decent enough from him. And then, Van der Merwe, obviously, got over for his try. I actually, I did say before the game that I didn't feeling that he would get over for a try, and it's not that like I've got a crystal ball or whatever. It's just that I think in terms of between himself and Grobler, he's probably the better of the two in terms of once he goes off the back of the maul, actually being able to get over and get the ball down. And then we got himself and Van der Fleer credited with 1 try each there as well. Successful carries then, 8 from Jack Conan. I thought Conan was fantastic in the game. Real kind of leadership role. And, I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not, but I feel like with him as the captain, like Leinster performed better. I don't know, is it that Bird isn't a brilliant captain? Sometimes it feels like with certain rugby teams where someone is the captain because they're the best player, because they're guaranteed to get picked, so it makes sense, right? But not necessarily always the best in terms of leadership, decision making, etc. on the field when the pressure kind of comes on. But I feel like Conan leads the team well. Then 4 carries from de Klerk. Didn't get to show all of his danger in the game, but that guy's going to be back because he's a very good player. Clean breaks then, 2 for Lowe and 1 for de Klerk. Lowe kind of I guess it's an unintended pun, but a low key performance from him. But it was still, he was going out there, he was doing what he needed to do. There weren't spectacular finishes or amazing kicks or anything like that, but what he needed to do, he did well. Defenders beaten then, Ryan Bird with 3 and Papier with 3. So Bird got player of the match, and I think it was well deserved as well. But it wasn't for me. It wasn't for the defenders beaten or any of the flash stuff that he kind of made a name for himself before. Like as I said in the build up, that this is a guy who came in and he looked like a bit of a show pony, honestly, where give him the ball in open field and he can out sprint backs and etc. right. And score from halfway line and all that kind of stuff. But then his core work wasn't great. But as I said, over the last 2 seasons, he's really improved that part of his game. And, I think this performance in this final has kind of been a combination of that. He's got to keep that going now as well, though. And then Papier, a decent performance in the losing team from him. Meters made then, Jimmy O'Brien with 62, doing well there from full back. And he we saw in the stats in the build-up, he was Leinster's highest, carrier in terms of meters made for the season as well. So no real surprise that he came on top of that as well. And then Hewson with 48 for the Bulls. Again, someone who didn't have his best game in this one, but someone who I think is definitely going to recover from that because he produces too many good performances not to. Offloads then, no surprise, Leinster's top offloader, RG Stamen, so that's like 2 more, just 45 for the season, which again is just absolutely crazy. Kane Moody then with 2 for the Bulls. Onto the defence then, Conan with 15 tackles to Norkia's 12. So, the Bulls back row certainly, overshadowed in this game, outplayed by the Leinster back row, but still you got guys like Norkia, still going out there, making their tackles. The great thing about the Bulls is that the heads, you very rarely see heads dropping in the team, especially in the pack. I felt like in the backs, maybe there was a couple of players who did that, but I felt like the pack, even though they were on the losing side and they knew it, they still didn't give it up. Like they kept trying all the way through. And, sometimes when it's not happening for you, that's what you've got to do. You just got to keep plugging away and it's almost like take your punishment, right? Because I feel like there are some teams, like if you look at, let's say, the Italian national team, right? You see them, when things are going badly for them, you see all around the team heads are dropping, and it's maybe a 30-point beating turns into like a 50-60-point beating because of that. But the Bulls, not going to happen for them, and Norkia was kind of the symbol of that today, I felt. Then turnovers 1, Ross Byrne, he gets the 0 for Leinster, but you could have put any of the 23 up there. I don't know, maybe like alphabetical order he got put in for that. And then Nizam Carr with 1 for the Bulls. So I think, it was Van Staden got the other one for them, but it wasn't a game of, massive swings with turnovers. Okay, so that's your stats. Then let's talk about the team. So we'll talk about the Bulls first. First of all, the scrum didn't go as well as they wanted it today, and I honestly was impressed by the Leinster scrum in terms of, being able to put pressure on and, being solid on their own feet as well. And, especially young Clarkson, because he's been to South Africa with the Leinster team, unlike a lot of the other front rowers that were starting for Leinster. And he's been in those games where the Bulls have absolutely creamed their scrum and, have put like, what was it, 67 points or something, or 62 points they put on us a couple of seasons ago. So he's been there and done that with those. So to be able to perform this game, I thought was great for him. Porter, decent performance from him as well. He did get a couple where he kind of, his hips were coming out and stuff on the Bulls feed, but it wasn't enough to kind of affect his overall game. But for the Bulls, as I said, the scrum didn't go as well as they wanted it to. So that was kind of one part of the game that maybe they thought, okay, that's where we get an edge there. And then their own throw and the line out as well. Leinster, I felt Leinster did better putting pressure on the Bulls line out than the Bulls did putting pressure on the Leinster line out. And maybe they gave, Leinster a bit too much in terms of, I'm not going to say an easy ride, because you can see guys are up there and they're competing and they were like whiskers away from stealing the ball, but they didn't steal the ball. They didn't, make it a scrappy ball for Leinster, and that maybe helped the Sheehan to kind of settle into the game as well, because his set piece, can be poor at times as well. So the fact then that set piece was going against the Bulls, wasn't great. And then the fact that, they were the guys for the most part, because both teams are doing, but they were the guys making the handling errors in the wet conditions as well. And it's all just little things like that, right? Just a little bit more against you. And, they find themselves 19 points to 0 down, or 19 points to 0 down, sorry. By half time, they missed, great opportunity to score before the break. And I felt like if they'd gotten over then, there's definitely a chance for them back into the game. And then even I was still thinking, just get that start, that, bump at the start of the second half, and, put the pressure on this Leinster team, because if we've seen it final after final, tight game after tight game, when the pressure comes on this Leinster team, if you get to that point with 20 minutes to go and the game is on the knife edge, Leinster aren't going to, for the most part at least, aren't going to score to win the game in the last 20 minutes, right? So it's then up to you. Can you produce that to do it? But they weren't able to get themselves close enough. The try from Van der Merwe was a bit of a false start from them, because they never really got themselves in a position where you thought, okay, well, they blew this chance, or, Leinster had to defend for their lives to keep them out there. There wasn't kind of either amazing clear-cut chances that they didn't get, as you saw, they only had one clean break, or massive pressure other than before half time that they were putting on that Leinster line, where Leinster had to defend for their lives. So, and what happens then with Leinster is that then the pressure comes off them and they're able to get the scores to then pull away. And that's what they did. They kind of soaked up the pressure that the Bulls did throw at them, and then they came back then to win the game. So, not the best performance from the Bulls, but again, these guys, they're finishing top two in the league too often. They get into too many finals. For me, all they have to do really is time their run a little bit better for the playoffs. It feels to me like you look at the Bulls' results right over the last the 4 years pretty much that they've been in the in like the URC, and you see like their peaks are often like they're producing brilliant results, maybe like in rounds, say 15, 16, 17, and then, they're just absolutely destroying teams around then towards the tail of the regular season. Then they come into the playoffs and they are getting wins, like, knocking Leinster out, in that first, the semi-final of the first year, absolutely brilliant, but it felt like that was their peak there. And every time it feels like the peak is coming just a bit too early before the final, right? So if they can just get the timing right to peak for the final, they're going to get their hands on that trophy, because again, I think too good of a team, too good of a squad, too good of an organization not to, is my feeling on that. So, I hope that the Bulls do claim that. Like, I'd love to see them do it. Obviously, I won't love it if they beat Leinster in the final next year or wherever, but it'll be well deserved if they do. I'll say that. Now, on to Leinster. So, I've criticised them for their performances towards the end of the season, but one thing that they did that I've criticised them for not doing in previous seasons has been that they didn't shy away from, picking, frontliners for pretty much all of the games. They didn't play the same team every week or whatever, but you looked at the teams that they did pick and you could see, about maybe some weeks it's like that's pretty much their best 23 that they have available, or, between the 23, they've got maybe like 15 guys who would be in the first 23. Anyway, that kind of thing. Like, it wasn't one of these, like you look at previous seasons where it was basically like these 23, 25 guys are for like Champions Cup and these 20 odd guys are for URC, and never the two shall mix. Like, that didn't happen this year. Yes, they got knocked out of the Champions Cup earlier than they did in previous years, but you could see before that, there wasn't that divide that there was in previous years. There wasn't a case of we've got two camps within the camp. So I think that, you got to give credit to, Cullen for that. Certainly, Leo Cullen for that this year, but also we got to give massive credit to Jacques Nienaber. He came in for a lot of criticism, especially after the Northampton defeat about, the defense, was terrible and Northampton cut us apart and blah, blah, blah. Right. But now for the people who criticize him for that, you've got to give him, his dues for being able to then tighten up that Leinster defence for, that semi-final performance, and then even better in the final in terms of the defence, because you look at it, and again, you look at, the Bulls beat 20 players, right? And they only made one clean break. That doesn't happen if Leinster's defence isn't on it. And, Nienaber is the guy, who got criticised for the failure of the defence, and he absolutely should be the guy who, is credited for a brilliant performance from the defence in this final, and, helping Leinster get there and finally get their hands on a trophy. So he absolutely has to be given the credit that he deserves for that, because, I think in terms of the way this Leinster team are playing this season compared to other seasons, they're not going to win, this final based on their attack alone. And it had to be, the defense had to perform, and they absolutely did. And he's the guy, I think, that should get all the credit for that. Absolutely, brilliant, from him. And then we talk about kind of, some individual performances as well. Again, I thought, Prendergast much improved, still not perfect, and I'll continue to kind of call out what's poor and what's not. I still believe that Leinster need to bring in a season's number 10 into the squad to as a kind of a mentor figure for him maybe, but also just competition as well. That when he's not performing, he should be put on the bench, or sometimes left out to 23 altogether, because he's got to learn from stuff like that as well. And I do believe in giving people second chances, but if you just keep a guy in your starting 10 all the time, where he's playing brilliantly or poorly, then other than kind of a personal thing and wanting to win things, there's no kind of extra motivation for him to, that kind of fighting for his place and earning his place kind of thing, right, to perform better. So, yeah, I think that definitely has to be done. Also, I think that the James Gibson Park, fantastic player, but I think that, McGrath, coming in and performing so well, he goes so well with the Leinster play. I don't think you couldn't put him in an Ireland shirt and get a similar performance just because of the difference in styles. I think Gibson Park absolutely fits in with Ireland so much better. But for Leinster, it always feels like because McGrath is playing more of the games in Gibson Park as well, that he's got more of a feel for, especially now that a lot of the younger players are coming through into the side, that he's actually been playing with compared to Gibson Park. I thought that was great. I thought Fintan Gunn was good off the bench. Again, Ross Byrne getting to get on was brilliant. I thought the back row went well. Van der Fleer, he was injured, comes in, he puts in a decent performance. Conan leading well. Baird, man of the match there. I thought Ryan went well alongside McCarthy. Then, Snyman, great impact off the bench. Front row did really well, starting the game. And then when the replacement come on as well, things didn't drop from there either. So they got to be given credit too. So, this felt like a real kind of 23-man performance from Leinster. And it's a long time since we kind of seen that from them as well. So, you've got to give everyone credit for it. fantastic that they've won a trophy, and now, people are going to be stupid, right? They're going to be like, okay, well, now they won a trophy, they're obviously now going to do the double next year or wherever. But for me, I'm just happy won a trophy, and next year is next year. Next season is next season. We'll talk about that when we get there. I'm not even kind of thinking about that because there's too much rugby between now and then, for starters. But also, you can't just. We do it all the time, right? We label people's favourites before anyone has even touched a rugby ball, which I think, I suppose bookies have to, right? That's how they make their money. But next year is next year. Like, we're talking about, for me at least, kind of 10 months away, before you start thinking about who's going to be lifting what trophy or in contention for it, at that stage. So, just as Leinster fan, delighted with our win. Commiserations to the Bulls fans, though, your time is going to come. I truly, truly believe that. But also, I just want to say a massive thank you to all the people who have been watching my videos recently, have been interacting as well. It's been brilliant. It's been so good having, whether it doesn't matter where you're from, whether you're South African or Irish, or like you're from the UK or somewhere else in Europe or anywhere else in the world as well. Like, I just love being able to interact with people and keeping things respectful and that kind of thing, like, and seeing other opinions. And it's been great as well having people just put me on to say, oh, you should keep an eye on this player or that player or whatever. Over the last few seasons has been brilliant in terms of just my education as well on learning about players in teams that maybe I don't watch all that often. So it's been fantastic. And again, it's my privilege to be able to make videos like this and have people actually take the time to watch them. So I want to say a massive thank you to all of you. It's the end of the URC season. It's obviously not the end of the rugby. We will be doing other rugby stuff, but I realized that some people, maybe they're only watching my stuff for URC. So for you guys, if you're not going to be coming back until next season, you'll enjoy your off season. I hope rugby goes well, life goes well for you, and I'll see you then. For those of you who are kind of sticking around for kind of summer tours, lines, etc., there will be obviously be other content coming out as well, so kind of watch the space on that. But again, just a massive thank you to all of you, and let me know what you thought down in the comments.